Welcome to this deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're turning our attention to, well, a real treasure trove. The letters of William James, compiled by his son. You know William James, of course, the huge figure in American thought, philosopher, psychologist.
Decorated giant.
But these letters, they give you something different, a much more intimate view, ground level almost, the man himself.
Exactly. It's not just the polished theories. You see the struggles, the quirks, the everyday stuff that really shaped those big ideas.
We've got a whole collection of excerpts here covering, many years of his life.
Yeah, pretty wide span. And our goal for this deep dive isn't just, summarizing his philosophy. It's about pulling out those revealing nuggets.
Showing who he was.
Yes. What were the personal battles, the surprising observations, the relationships? What actually informed that unique perspective he had?
Seeing the life that fueled the thought.
That's it.
And, that connection feels so central to James himself. His son mentions it in the preface, doesn't he?
Right. He does. James believed you couldn't judge ideas just by logic alone.
Right. You need to understand the person's mental attitude sympathetically.
Recognizing that philosophy isn't purely rational, it's biased by feelings.
And these letters feel like that sympathetic lens pointed right at him.
They really do. You get everything, complaints about German grammar, wrestling with huge existential questions, navigating chaotic family trips.
Oh, the family trip.
Battling health issues, engaging with, the science of his day, even the weird stuff.
It's a window into the messy human reality behind the intellectual titan.
Absolutely.
So let's dive in. Where should we start? Maybe setting the stage. Family, early life.
Sounds good. William James came from Scots and Irish roots. Prosperous families, educated, Protestant, settled back in the 18th century, doing well.
And his father, Henry James Sr., looms large, doesn't he?
Oh, definitely. A significant presence. The descriptions make him sound, impressive, but really unconventional.
Deeply critical of standard religion.
Right. The son says he made hay of things like conscience, organized churches, saw them as rigid, pedantic.
There's that amazing phrase about his thinking, smiting Ursprünglichkeit of intuition.
Yeah, hard to translate that perfectly.
It suggests this forceful original insight, right? Not just logic.
Exactly, intuitive. Plus this deep sort of humor about human nature.
And the letters clarify he wasn't actually a Swedenborgian minister, despite the rumors.
No, he engaged with those ideas, but actually found the sect lacking in manhood and spirit, as he put it. So religious, yes, but very much on his own terms.
And you see the contrast immediately with his younger brother, Henry Jr., the novelist.
Right from the start, William, even as a boy, drawn to exact knowledge.
While Henry had that secret passion for authorship.
Hints at their different cast of mind, one looking out scientifically, the other looking in narratively.
And William's own traits show up early, fascinated by international differences.
Even while calling it barren.
Reading widely in 3 languages, encouraged to trust his own impulses.
That feels very Jamesian, that trust and impulse.
And he sketched, too. The dog, the turtle, the man mentioned in the illustrations list.
Yeah.
That observer's eye was always there, maybe.
Seems like it. So you have this intense, observant young guy, unconventional family background. Where does he go next? Finding a path.
Well, it wasn't exactly straightforward. His education was winding.
Started with chemistry.
Yeah, enthusiastic at first, but it faded. Then comparative anatomy.
And he really struggled with needing to pick a profession, didn't he? Felt he had insufficient knowledge.
Had to go it blind, he wrote. That uncertainty, needing to act without knowing everything, feels like it echoes later in his philosophy.
Definitely. Thinking about belief and action.
He looked at medicine, found alienism, what we call psychiatry, most interesting.
Already drawn to the mind, even through medicine.
And practical stuff, too, like a possible salary at Agassiz Museum, wanting a home in Cambridge. Everyday concerns mixed right in.
And there's that amazing praise for Jeffries Wyman, the naturalist he worked with.
Called him a perfect naturalist.
Best balanced mind, disinterestedness, no ego. It's like an ideal intellectual model.
Though he adds that little note, maybe Wyman had too little restlessness of ambition.
Yeah. Admired the virtue, but saw the need for drive, too. Classic James. Seeing both sides.
So this search, this uncertainty and drive, it leads him to something pivotal. The Amazon expedition in 1865.
Yeah, he paused his medical studies for that, joined Louis Agassiz. But the letters show it wasn't quite the glamorous adventure you might imagine.
Not at all. He figured out pretty fast he was not intended to be a field naturalist.
The physical reality was just Harsh.
The voyage sounds awful.
Seasickness.
12 days of it, feeling indescribably hopeless, homeless, and friendless amidst hideous moist gales. We really feel the misery.
Then Rio, sensory overload, strange sights, the delicious smell of land.
But also the heat, the observations on people, meeting the emperor, and the downsides.
Anthropophagus fish stopping bathing.
And mosquitoes, of course.
Yeah.
Always mosquitoes. And he wasn't impressed by most of his companions. Called the other savants an uninteresting crew.
Saved his praise for just a couple, like Tom Ward in the Agassises.
But what he did get from Agassiz is interesting. He thought there was some humbug in the science, but valued the way of feeling, that sense of weight and solidity from Agassiz's deep knowledge of facts.
And Agassiz apparently pitched into James's own loose and superficial way of thinking.
Sounds like a tough but maybe necessary lesson in rigor.
Yeah, forced him to look at his own habits. He also had some pretty sharp takes on the local culture, called Brazilian life sloopy and ignorant.
Found the Indians' laziness infuriating.
But maybe the biggest takeaway came after he got sick. Thought he had smallpox.
And realized he was cut out for a speculative rather than an active life.
Started to accept being a featherweight, found more peace of mind. It's like this intense physical ordeal led to this crucial self-understanding.
Really shaped his path.
That vulnerability is striking. And you see his connection to home stays strong through it all. Warm letters, wishing his brother Harry was there.
Or some person I could talk to. And that note about Miss Fanny Dixwell being decidedly A1.
Yeah, keeps it human.
So after the Amazon, he's back home. But the health issues? They weren't solved.
Not by a long shot. This leads into that difficult period in Europe, the 18 months in Germany.
Right. He had to interrupt medical school again.
Yeah. Health got worse. Insomnia, digestion, eyes, back. He admitted he was completely puzzled and baffled himself.
And that chronic illness, you have to think it profoundly shaped his views on, the self, the body-mind connection, things central to his later psychology.
Absolutely. While he's there, though, his letters are full of these sharp observations. Strasbourg, the mix of French and German.
His description of Saxons as short and ill-favored, eccentrically toothed, a bit harsh.
Yeah. And wrestling with German itself, difficult, those endless combinations.
Corresponding to an impromptu mode of thought, he said, inviting speculation.
But he also hammered the academic writing style. Hegel's monstrous sentences.
Lamenting they left out the human element.
That's pure James right there, that critique.
And those little anecdotes are great. The Hamburg spinster asking if Americans were the very worst.
And James having to gently correct her, or meeting the artist's callback and finding his comments kind of ordinary.
Contrasted with his real love for the paintings in Munich, wishing Henry could see them.
Shows that artistic sensibility was strong, but health was always the backdrop. Reading, socializing made it worse.
But felt like a new man after the spa at Teplitz.
And amidst all this, the philosophical thinking is really bubbling up in the letters, intertwined with his physical state.
Struggling with the ontological window. What exactly was that?
Seems like that core problem.
Yeah.
How do we know reality? How do we connect to anything beyond ourselves?
And seeing head and heart as inextricably entangled.
Huge insight for him. Intellect, emotion, you can't pull them apart. Skepticism about grand creation theories, too.
The letter to Wendell Holmes Jr. from then is really something.
Yeah, it talks about loneliness, needing support, grappling with huge ideas. Is mankind its own god?
The stoic feeling of being a sentinel. The divine enthusiasm of moral culture.
But also skepticism about talking about morals, maybe hinting at his later pragmatism, focus on action.
And that critique of impatience of results as an American characteristic.
Believing results just float up from daily work. Feels like a personal creed forming there.
Plus, mentioning meeting the most beautiful woman in Berlin. Always observing.
He comes home in late 68. Health, not great, but matured in character and thought. Determined to figure things out back home.
Which leads into that period called invalidism in Cambridge.
Right, 1869 to 72. The Valley of Wave Shadow. Sounds bleak.
Physically constrained, yes, but his mind was racing. Weak eyes, but devouring books, neurology, physiology, psychology.
Honing that notebook habit. Reading, thinking, writing. His reviews from then are seen as prophetic.
But also a time of deep personal crisis. Religious despondency.
And not just vague doubt. It was tied to the moral constitution of things. Good, evil, suffering, meaning, the big stuff.
And that powerful reflection. Feeling we're nature through and through, totally conditioned.
But then a spark reveals something real.
That tension. Determinism versus this inner sense of something more. Feels like the foundation for his later work on belief experience.
He definitely felt that intellectual hunger, frustrated by his health limits.
Taking that comparison, becoming a physiologist through daily work is like becoming a drunkard through daily drinking.
The power of habit accumulation, for good or ill.
Which brings us to a big shift. Teaching at Harvard, marriage, and tackling the principles of psychology.
Finally starts teaching in 72, physiology first. But his path evolved. Physiology, then psychology, then philosophy.
Driven by his own interests, right? Not just a set career path.
Exactly. Moving towards the questions pulling him most strongly, though he debated it internally. Biology versus mental science.
Felt philosophy as a business was not normal. Bred hypochondria. Craved the stable reality of biology. That uncertainty again.
He starts a physiological psychology course using Spencer, blending biology and mind. But he was critical of academia too.
Saw mediocrity from people writing with one eye on the problem, the other on academic politics.
Yeah, consequences to our enemy or our lawgiver, argued philosophy needed wider openness of mind.
And then a huge personal step. Marriage to Alice H. Gibbons in 1878.
And apparently he knew right away. Met her in 76, wrote she was the future Mrs. W.J. Charming.
The collection is dedicated to his mother, too, a gallant and devoted ally. Family was clearly central.
He and Alice had several kids. Henry, William, Herman, Margaret Mary, Alexander Robertson.
And that great line about dinner feeling like a boiler factory with all the noise keeps him grounded.
All while writing the principles. Got the contract in 78, worked on it during his honeymoon.
Incredible dedication. Worked very slowly, proposed 2 volumes, daily work, getting up at 4 a.m.
Wrote each page 4 or 5 times. Carried it on his mind for 9 years.
Wow. 9 years. You can almost feel the relief when he finished in 1890.
His assessment was typical James, a good one, but the field itself was still anti-scientific.
Humble, considering its impact. It brought so many people into psychology.
Yeah, and around this time, he notes that the lab work felt like a burden, pushing him more towards philosophy itself.
Okay, now for a really fascinating, maybe unexpected part of his work, psychical research.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just some, weird side interest. It connected directly to his core questions in psychology and philosophy.
He was drawn to those abnormal, supernormal things. Telepathy, mediums.
Phenomena he called wild facts. Things that just didn't fit the standard scientific boxes, no stall or pigeonhole for them.
And he knew about the bias, the superstition, the fraud.
But he argued that was why you had to look. Examine it in an unprejudiced spirit, even if it hurt his reputation.
Willing to follow the evidence, challenge the materialism of the day.
He got really involved. The English Society for Psychical Research helped found the American one, was its president.
And the letters show him in the thick of it, attending seances.
Like that hideously inept psychical night with the fraudulent Charleston medium, clearly critical but curious.
He did actual research, too, the census of hallucinations.
And that really provocative question from 1884, could spiritualism and the SPR be instruments for a new era of faith?
Wow. Shows he was thinking about the massive implications if any of this was real. Consciousness, survival, religion.
It feels like a natural extension of exploring the varieties of religious experience, pushing the boundaries of consciousness.
Moving into his later years, the letters keep giving us these rich reflections, insights into his relationships.
You see his huge admiration for people like Charles Renouvier, the French philosopher.
Credited him with an intelligible and reasonable conception of freedom.
Called him one of the greatest of philosophic characters. And that idea of freedom, indeterminism, was so key for James.
He wrestled constantly with determinism versus indeterminism, didn't he? Free will or not?
Argued passionately for it, especially on moral grounds. Felt morality was meaningless without real choice, even if the arguments felt, futile sometimes.
He praised others like Shadworth Hodgson, robust, big, original suggestions. But he could be sharp, too.
Oh, yeah. His critique of Wundt as the classic professor who had to have an opinion on everything.
Whether it was original or not.
Exactly. Contrast that with Josiah Royce, his Harvard colleague, wealthiest mind of thought I ever met with. High praise.
But academia wasn't all roses. That Balzacian figure in the philosophy department.
Described in really harsh terms. Coarse, vulgar, vain, cunning, mendacious. Shows the politics were rough.
And then there's his brother Henry. Central, complex relationship.
Deep affection, but different outlooks. William commenting on Henry's novels.
And William's comment about Henry reviewing their father, saying Henry approached it as someone for whom religious life was complete terra incognita.
really highlights their different ways of seeing something so fundamental.
He admired other writers, like Howells, and his reaction to that critic, Mueller, reviewing the psychology.
Classic James. Acknowledged some truth, but slammed the ungenerous tone, the focus on tiny decimal points when a coarse qualitative result was enough.
His advice, get the good, forget the bad.
Yeah.
Very pragmatic.
There's also that note about doctors finding some weakness in his heart, another layer of physical vulnerability.
And his reflections on his sister Alice's death are so moving, a great release for her.
But also seeing her life, despite terrific frustrations, as a triumph, admired that she never whimpered, her fortitude.
Beyond all the intense intellectual work, the letters show he really needed and loved simple things, nature.
Oh, absolutely. Keene Valley, Chakarua, New Hampshire, his playground.
Buying land there, feeling lord of part of the earth, clearing it, raising chickens.
Becoming an expert jockey, just trying out horses.
He contrasts that freedom, especially being on his horse, with Cambridge life.
And his love for New England comes through so strongly when he's away. It's brightness and freshness, his parents.
That quote from his father's letter to Henry. Persians taught boys to ride, shoot, and tell the truth. Values beyond just books.
Though travel wasn't always simple. Taking the kids abroad in 92, 93.
He called it a perfect hell.
Constant quarrels, screams, and squeals. So different from their quiet Cambridge house. Had to scatter the kids temporarily.
Staying in Paris, Switzerland, Florence. Still observing everything. Cost differences.
Life in Florence weather. The cheap, excellent man cook. Learning Italian from the naked Latin roots.
Figuring the kids needed friends more than monuments. Practical.
Switzerland, walking helped his health. Planning his reading philosophy of nature, art history, always thinking.
And that perspective on life's seesaw between the elemental things and the others.
Finding the overcultured longing for the insipidity of health kind of pathetic. Maybe they'd lost touch with the vital basics.
And feeling that fellow feeling with the French celebrity who was awkward in high society, preferring authenticity. Okay, let's wrap up with a few final points. The shorter psychology book.
Yes, the briefer course. His description of making it is just hilarious.
Adding twaddle, leaving out all the interests.
Polemics, history, humor, pathos. Gone. Blackening paragraph tops. Called it a pack of lies. Hoped it would make money.
So cynical, especially next to his pride in the big book's literary success looking down on Mark Twain.
You also see his strong views on the Catholic Church at Cresse l'Enfant crush the institution's dogma.
But differentiating that sharply from individuals he met. That balance again, abstract critique versus human sympathy.
And that reflection near 50, life and death seem singularly close together. Life is a farce of frustration.
But balanced by acknowledging the triumph in how some people endure. It's so human.
And that Goethe quote he used feels like his motto. All theory is gray, dear friend, but the golden tree of life is green.
Perfect summary. Lived experience over abstract systems.
Exactly.
Wow, what a journey through these letters. You really do get such a vivid sense of William James. Not just the famous name.
The person.
Yeah. The restless energy, the incredible curiosity across so many fields. Those deep, ongoing health struggles that were clearly tied into his thinking.
The family life, the wit, the warmth, it all comes through.
We've seen the philosopher tackling the biggest ideas, freedom, reality, consciousness.
But always grounded by the man dealing with seasickness, noisy kids, annoying colleagues, the joy of riding a horse.
It just hammers home that point from the preface, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To get the ideas, you need to get the man, his feelings, biases, that sympathetic nature.
His experiences, the health issues, family stuff, even the psychical research, they weren't separate from his philosophy. They were the soil.
Thinking back, the constant struggle, the search for stability, balancing theory and life, the human element.
Yeah.
It all weaves together.
It really does.
So maybe the thought to leave you with, connecting his life to ours, is this. How do our own struggles, our messy lives, health, family, work, the little joys and frustrations, how does that shape how we see the world?
The ideas that matter to us.
Right. James felt his head and heart were inextricably entangled. Maybe our thinking is just as rooted in that messy, golden tree of life as it is in theory.
Something to definitely mull over as you go about your day. Look for those sparks.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.